All right. Hello, friends. This is my first time doing this, so please bear with me. I have put out Remind and Teams access for students, so hopefully you guys will get here soon. But yeah, so we're going to be reading Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury today. It's one of my all-time favorite books, and I really hope you enjoy it. It's one we would be covering in class normally, so... Sweet boy. Milo. Come here. Come here, Pop. Come here. Oh, if you guys can let me know in the chat if you can hear me okay, all that kind of stuff. I just don't know how much I need to project. I'm using my regular computer, not my school one, so I don't know how well it picks up. Look at my sweet boy. Hi, baby. Ag. Hey, Jenna, how's it going? Look at my sweet little boy. He's so precious. Little snaggletooth. Mwah. I realize now a 5-minute early start might have been too early. Yes, I am a cute little boy. Yes, I am. He's going to try to crawl up on the table here in a minute, so that'll be fun. Yes, it is. All right. Go play with your brother. So, I know dead air is terrible for television, radio, and TV. Movies, whatever. So, I hope everybody is surviving quarantine okay. I am, Miles Burton, get off the table. This is my life. I thought when we got out of school, I would, have the ability to stop yelling random things that made absolutely no sense. Like, please don't hit your classmates, and don't put that in your mouth. No. Now I'm just yelling at my dogs instead. It's fun. It's fun. All right. Let's go ahead and get started, shall we? I hope that we get some more people as we go along. Right now I'm up to 4. Yes. But it's about 4 o'clock. So today we are reading Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451. Starting at chapter 1, The Hearth and the Salamander. It was a pleasure to burn. It was a special pleasure to see things eaten, to see things blackened and changed. With the brass nozzle in his fists, with his great python spitting its venomous kerosene upon the world, the blood pounded in his head. and his hands were the hands of some amazing conductor, playing all the symphonies of blazing and burning to bring down the tatters and charcoal ruins of history. With his symbolic helmet numbered 451 on his stolid head, and his eyes all orange flame with the thought of what came next, he flicked the igniter, and the house jumped in a gorging fire that burned the evening sky red and yellow and black. He strode in a swarm of fireflies. He wanted above all, like the old joke, to shove a marshmallow on a stick in the furnace, while the flapping pigeon-wing books died on the porch lawn of the house. While the books went up in sparkling whirls and blew away on a wind turned dark with burning, Montag grinned the fierce grin of all men singed and driven back by the flame. He knew that when he returned to the firehouse, he might wink at himself, a minstrel man, burnt corked in the mirror. Later, going to sleep, he would feel the fiery smile still gripped by his face muscles in the dark. It never went away, that smile. It never went away, as long as he remembered. He hung up his black beetle-colored helmet and shined it. He hung his flame-proof jacket neatly. He showered luxuriously and then, whistling, hands in his pockets, walked across the upper floor of the fire station and fell down the hole. At the last moment, when disaster seemed positive, he pulled his hands from his pockets and broke his fall by grasping the golden pole. He slid to a squeaking halt, the heels 1 inch from the concrete floors downstairs. He walked out of the fire station and along the midnight street toward the subway where the silent, air-propelled train slid soundlessly down its lubricated flue in the earth and let him out with a great puff of warm air onto the cream-tiled escalator rising to the suburb. Whistling, he let the escalator waft him into the night air. He walked towards the corner, thinking little at all about nothing in particular. Before he reached the corner, however, he slowed, as if a wind had sprung up from nowhere, as if someone had called his name. The last few nights, he had had the most uncertain feelings about the sidewalk just around the corner here, moving in the starlight towards his house. He had felt that a moment prior to making the turn, someone had been there. The air seemed charged with a special calm, as if someone had waited there, quietly, and only a moment before he came, simply turned to a shadow and let him through. Perhaps his nose detected a faint perfume. Perhaps the skin on the back of his hands, on his face, felt the temperature rise at this one spot where a person standing might raise the immediate atmosphere 10 degrees for an instant. There was no understanding it. Each time he made the turn, he saw only white, unused, buckling sidewalk, with perhaps, on one night, something vanishing swiftly across the lawn before he could focus his eyes or speak. But now, tonight, he slowed almost to a stop. His inner mind, reaching out to turn the corner for him, had heard the faintest whisper. Breathing? Or was it the atmosphere compressed merely by someone standing very quietly, waiting? He turned the corner. The autumn leaves blew over the moonlit pavement in such a way as to make the girl who was moving there seem fixed to a sliding walk, letting the motion of the wind and the leaves carry her forward. Her head was half bent to watch her shoes stir the circling leaves. Her face was slender and milk-white, and in it was a gentle kind of hunger that touched over everything with tireless curiosity. It was a look almost of pale surprise. Crap, I lost my place. Yay. It was a look almost of pale surprise. The dark eyes were so fixed to the world that no move escaped them. Her dress was white, and it whispered. He almost thought he heard the motion of her hands as she walked, and the infinitely small sound now, the white stir of her face turning when she discovered she was a moment away from a man who stood in the middle of the pavement waiting. The trees overhead made a great sound of letting down their dry rain. The girl stopped and looked as if she might pull back in surprise, but instead stood there regarding Montag with eyes so dark and shining and alive that he felt he had said something quite wonderful. But he knew his mouth had only moved to say hello, and then when she seemed hypnotized by the salamander on his arm and the phoenix disc on his chest, he spoke again. Of course, he said. You're a new neighbor, aren't you? And you must be, she raised her eyes from his professional symbols, the firemen. Her voice trailed off. How oddly you say that. I'd have known it with my eyes shut, she said slowly. What, the smell of kerosene? My wife always complains, he laughed. You never wash it off completely. No, you don't, she said in awe. He felt she was walking in a circle around him, turning him end for end, shaking him quietly and emptying his pockets without once moving herself. Kerosene, he said, because the silence had lengthened, is nothing but perfume to me. Does it seem like that, really? Of course. Why not? She gave herself time to think of it. I don't know. She turned to face the sidewalk, going towards their homes. Do you mind if I walk back with you? I'm Clarice McClellan. Clarice? Guy Montag. Come along. What are you doing out so late wandering around? How old are you? They walked in the warm, cool-blowing night on the silvered pavement, and there was the faintest breath of fresh apricots and strawberries in the air. And he looked around and realized this was quite impossible so late in the year. There was only the girl walking with him now, her face bright as the snow in the moonlight, and he knew she was working his questions around, seeking the best answers she could possibly give. Well, she said, I'm 17, and I'm crazy. My uncle says the two always go together. When people ask your age, he said, always tell them 17 and insane. Isn't this a nice time of night to walk? I like to smell things and look at things, and sometimes stay up all night walking and watching the sunrise. They walked on in silence, and finally, she said thoughtfully, You know, I'm not afraid of you at all. He was surprised. Why should you be? So many people are. Afraid of firemen, I mean. But you're just a man, after all. He saw himself in her eyes, suspended in two shining drops of bright water, himself dark and tiny in fine detail, the lines about his mouth, everything there, as if her eyes were two miraculous bits of violet amber that might capture and hold him intact. Her face, turned to him now, was a fragile milk crystal with a soft and light, constant light in it. It was not the hysterical light of electricity, but what? But the strangely comfortable and rare and gently flattering light of a candle. One time, as a child in a power failure, his mother had found and lit a last candle, and there had been a brief hour of rediscovery, of such illumination that space lost its vast dimensions and drew comfortably around them, and they, mother and son, alone transformed, hoping that the power might not come on again too soon. And then, Clarice McClellan said, Do you mind if I ask, how long have you worked at being a fireman? Since I was 20, 10 years ago. Do you ever read any of the books you burn? He laughed. That's against the law. Oh, of course. It's fine work. Monday, burn Malay. Wednesday, Whitman. Friday, Faulkner. Burn 'em to ashes, then burn the ashes. That's our official slogan. They walked still further, and the girl said, Is it true that long ago firemen put out fires instead of going to start them? No. Houses have always been fireproof. Take my word for it. Strange. I heard once that a long time ago houses used to burn by accident and they needed firemen to stop the flames. He laughed. She glanced quickly over. Why are you laughing? I don't know. He started to laugh again and stopped. Why? You laugh when I haven't said anything funny and you answer right off. You never stop to think about what I've asked you. He stopped walking. You are an odd one, he said, looking at her. Haven't you any respect? I don't mean to be insulting. It's just, I love to watch people too much, I guess. Well, doesn't this mean anything to you? He tapped the numerals 451 stitched on his char-colored sleeve. Yes, she whispered. She increased her pace. Have you ever watched the jet cars racing on the boulevards down that way? You're changing the subject. I sometimes think the drivers don't know what grass is or flowers because they never see them slowly. You showed a driver a green blur. Oh, yes, he'd say, that's grass. A pink blur? That's a rose garden. White blurs are houses. Brown blurs are cows. My uncle drove slowly on a highway once. He drove 40 miles an hour and they jailed him for 2 days. Isn't that funny? And sad, too. You think too many things, said Montag uneasily. I rarely watch the parlor walls or go to races or fun parks, so I've got a lot of time for crazy thoughts, I guess. Have you seen the 200-foot long billboards in the country beyond town? Did you know that once billboards were only 20 feet long? The cars started rushing so quickly they had to stretch the advertising so it would last. I didn't know that, Montag laughed abruptly. But I know something else you don't. There's dew on the grass in the morning. He suddenly couldn't remember if he had known this or not, and it made him quite irritable. And if you look, she nodded at the sky, there's a man in the moon. He hadn't looked for a long time. They walked the rest of the way in silence, hers thoughtful, his a kind of clenching and uncomfortable silence, in which he shot her accusing glances. When they reached her house, all its lights were blazing. What's going on? Montag had rarely seen that many house lights. Oh, just my mother and father and uncle sitting around talking. It's like being a pedestrian, only rarer. My uncle was arrested another time. Did I tell you? For being a pedestrian. Oh, we are most peculiar. But what do you talk about? She laughed at this. Good night. She started up her walk. Then she seemed to remember something and came back to look at him with wonder and curiosity. Are you happy? She said. Am I what? He cried. But she was gone, running in the gentle moonlight, her front door shutting gently. Happy. Of all the nonsense. He stopped laughing. He put his hand to the glove hole of his front door and let it know his touch. The front door slid open. Of course I'm happy. What does she think, I'm not? He asked the quiet rooms. He stood looking up at the ventilator grill in the hall and suddenly remembered that something lay hidden behind the grill, something that seemed to peer down at him. He moved his eyes quickly away. What a strange meeting on a strange night. He remembered nothing like it save one afternoon a year ago when he had met an old man in the park and they had talked. Montag shook his head. He looked at a blank wall. The girl's face was there, really quite beautiful in memory, astonishing in fact. She had a very thin face like the dial of a small clock seen faintly in a dark room in the middle of the night when you wakened to see the time and the clock telling you the hour and the minute and the second, with a white silence and a glowing all certainty, and knowing what it has to tell of the night passing swiftly on towards further darkness, but moving also towards a new sun. What? Asked Montag of his other self, that subconscious idiot that ran on babbling at times, quite independent of his will, habit, and conscience. He glanced at the back wall. How like a mirror to her face? Impossible. For how many people did you know that refracted your own light to you? People were more often... He searched for a simile, found one in his work. Torches, blazing away until they're whiffed out. How rarely did other people's faces take of you and throw back your own expression, your own innermost trembling thought. What incredible power of identification the girl had. She was like the eager watcher of a marionette show, anticipating the flicker of an eyelid, each gesture of his hand, each flick of a finger, the movement before it began. How long had they walked together? 3 minutes? 5? Yet how large that time seemed now. How immense a figure she was on the stage before him. What a shadow she threw on the wall with her slender body. He felt that if his eye itched, she might blink, and if the muscles of his jaws stretched imperceptibly, she might yawn before he would. Why, he thought, now that I think about it, she almost seemed to be waiting for me there, in the street, so damn late at night. He opened the bedroom door. It was like coming into the cold, marbled room of a mausoleum after the moon is set. Complete darkness, not a hint of the silver world outside, the windows tightly shut, the chamber tomb world where no sound from the great city could penetrate. The room was not empty. He listened. The little mosquito-delicate dancing hum in the air, the electrical murmur of a hidden wasp snug in its special pink warm nest. The music was almost loud enough so he could follow the tune. He felt his smile slide away, melt, fold over and down on itself like a tallow skin, like the stuff of a fantastic candle burning too long and now collapsing and blown out. Darkness. He was not happy. He was not happy. He said the words to himself. He recognized this as the true state of affairs. He wore his happiness like a mask, and the girl had run off across the lawn with the mask, and there was no way of going to knock on her door and ask for it back. Without turning on the light, he imagined how his room would look, his wife stretched out on the bed, uncovered and cold, like a body displayed on the lid of a tomb, her eyes fixed to the ceiling by an invisible thread of steel, immovable, and in her ears the little seashells, the thimble radios tamped tight, an electronic ocean of sound, of music and talk coming in on the shore of her unsleeping mind. The room was indeed empty. Every night, the waves came in and bore her off on their great tides of sound, floating her, wide-eyed, toward the morning. There had been no night in the last 2 years that Mildred had not swum in that sea, had not gladly gone down in it for the third time. The room was cold, but nonetheless he felt he could not breathe. He did not wish to open the drapes and open the French windows, for he did not want the moon to come into the room. So, with the feeling of a man who will die in the next hour for lack of air, he felt his way towards his open, separate, and therefore cold bed. An instant before his foot hit the object on the floor, he knew he would hit such an object. It was not unlike the feeling he had experienced before turning the corner and almost knocking the girl down. His foot, sending vibrations ahead, received back echoes of the small barrier across its path, even as the foot swung. His foot kicked. The object gave a dull clink and slid off into darkness. He stood very straight and listened to the person on the dark bed in the completely featureless night. The breath coming out of the nostrils was so faint it only stirred the furthest fringes of life, a small leaf, a black feather, a single fiber of hair. He still did not want outside light. He pulled out his igniter, felt the salamander etched on its silver disc, gave it a flick. 2 moonstones looked up at him in the light of a small handheld fire. 2 pale moonstones buried in a clear creek of water above which the life of the world ran, not touching them. Mildred! Her face was like a snow-covered island upon which rain might fall, but it felt no rain, over which clouds might pass their moving shadows, but she felt no shadow. There was only the singing of the thimbled wasps in her tamped shut ears, and her eyes, all glass, and breath going in and out, softly, faintly, in and out, her nostrils flaring, and not caring whether it came or went, winter came. The object he had sent tumbling with his foot now glinted under the edge of his own bed, a small crystal bottle of sleeping tablets, which earlier today had been filled with 30 capsules, and which now lay uncapped and empty in the light of this tiny flare. As he stood there, the sky over the house screamed. There was a tremendous ripping sound, as if 2 giant hands had torn 10,000 miles of black linen down the seams. Montag was cut in half. He felt his chest chopped down and split apart. The jet bombers going over. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 6 of them, 9 of them, 12 of them, one, and another, and another, did all the screaming for him. He opened his mouth and let their shriek come down and out between his bare teeth. The house shook. The flare went out in his hand. The moonstones vanished. He felt his hand plunge toward the telephone. The jets were gone. He felt his lips move, brushing the mouthpiece of the phone. Emergency hospital. A terrible whisper. He felt that the stars had been pulverized by the sound of the black jets, that in the morning the earth would be covered with their dust like a strange snow. That was his idiot thought as he stood shivering in the dark and let his lips go on, moving and moving. They had this machine. They had 2 machines, really. One of them slid down into your stomach like a black cobra down an echoing well, looking for all the old water and the old time gathered there. It drank up the green matter that flowed into the top in the slow boil. Did it drink of the darkness? Did it suck out all the poison accumulated within the years? It fed in silence, with an occasional sound of inner suffocation and a blind eye. It had an eye. The impersonal operator of the machine could, by wearing a special optical helmet, gaze into the soul of the person whom he was pumping out. What did the eye see? He did not say. He saw but did not see what the eye saw. The entire operation was not unlike the digging of a trench in one's yard. The woman on the bed was no more than a hard stratum of marble they had reached. Go on anyway, shove the bore down, slush up the emptiness, as if such a thing could be brought out in the throb of the suction snake. The operator stood smoking a cigarette. The other machine was working too. The other machine, operated by an equally impersonal fellow in non-stainable reddish-brown coveralls. This machine pumped all of the blood from the body and replaced it with flesh blood and serum. Gotta clean them out both ways, said the operator, standing over the silent woman. No use getting the stomach if you don't clean the blood. Leave that stuff in the blood, and the blood hits the brain like a mallet. Bang, a couple thousand times, and the brain just gives up. Just quits. Stop it, said Montag. I was just saying, said the operator. Are you done? Said Montag. They shut the machines up tight. We're done. His anger did not even touch them. They stood with the cigarette smoke curling around their noses and into their eyes without making them blink or squint. It's $50. First, why don't you tell me if she'll be all right? Sure, she'll be okay. We got all the mean stuff right here in our suitcase. I can't get to her now. As I said, when you take out the old and put in the new, you're okay. Neither of you is an MD. Why didn't they send an MD from emergency? Hell! The operator's cigarette moved on his lips. We get these cases 9 or 10 a night. Got so many started a few years ago we had these special machines built. With the optical lens, of course, that was new. The rest is ancient. You don't need to be an MD. Case like this, all you need is 2 handymen. Clean up the problem in half an hour. Look. He started for the door. We gotta go. We just had another call on the old ear thimble. 10 blocks from here. Somebody else jumped off the cap of a pillbox. Call us if you need us again. Keep her quiet. We got a contraceptive in her. She'll wake up hungry. So long. And the men with the cigarettes in their straight-line mouths, the men with the eyes of puff adders, took up their load of machine and tube and the case of liquid melancholy and the slow, dark sludge of nameless stuff and strolled out the door. Montag sank down into a chair and looked at this woman. Her eyes were closed now, gently, and he pulled out his hand to feel the warmth of breath on his palm. Mildred, he said at last. There are too many of us, he thought. There are billions of us, and that's too many. Nobody knows anyone. Strangers come and violate you. Strangers come and cut your heart out. Strangers come and take your blood. Good God, who were those men? I never saw them before in my life. Half an hour passed. The blood stream in this woman was new, and it seemed to have done a new thing to her. Her cheeks were very pink, and her lips were very fresh and full of color, and they looked soft and relaxed. Someone else's blood there. If only someone else's flesh and brain and memory. If only they could have taken her mind along to the dry cleaners and emptied the pockets and steamed and cleansed it and reblocked it and brought it back in the morning. If only... He got up and put back the drapes and opened the windows wide to let the night air in. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. Was it only an hour ago, Clarice McClellan in the street and him coming in, and the dark room and his foot kicking the little crystal bottle? Only an hour, but the world had melted down and sprung up in a new and colorless form. Laughter blew across the moon-colored lawn from the house of Clarice and her father and mother and the uncle who smiled so quietly and, above all, so earnestly. Their laughter was relaxed and hearty and not forced in any way, coming from the house so that it was brightly lit this late at night, while all the other houses were keeping to themselves in the darkness. Montag heard the voices talking, giving, talking, weaving, reweaving their hypnotic web. Montag moved out through the French windows and crossed the lawn without even thinking of it. He stood outside the house in the shadows, thinking he might even tap on their door and whisper, "Let me come in. I won't say anything. I just want to listen. What is it you're saying?" But instead he stood there, very cold, his face a mask of ice, listening to the old man's voice, the uncle, moving along at an easy pace. Well, after all, this is the age of the disposable tissue. Blow your nose on a person, wad them, flush them away, reach for another. Blow, wad, flush. Everyone using everyone else's coattails. How are you supposed to root for the home team when you don't even have a program or know the names? For that matter, what color jerseys are they wearing as they trot out onto the field? Montag moved back to his own house, left the window wide and checked Mildred, tucked the covers about her carefully, and lay down with the moonlight on his cheekbones and on the frowning ridges of his brow, the moonlight distilled in each eye to form a silver cataract there. One drop of rain. Clarice. Another drop. Mildred. A third. The uncle. A fourth. The fire tonight. 1 Clarice. 2 Mildred. 3 uncle. 4 fire. 1 Mildred. 2 Clarice. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Clarice, Mildred, uncle, fire, sleeping tablets, men, disposable tissue, coattails, blow, wad, flush. Clarice, Mildred, uncle, fire, tablets, tissue, blow, wad, flush. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, rain. The storm. The uncle laughing. Thunder falling downstairs. The whole world pouring down. The fire gushing up in a volcano. All rushing down and around in sputtering roar and a rivering stream towards morning. I don't know anything anymore, he said, and let a sleep lozenge dissolve on his tongue. At 9 a.m, Mildred's bed was empty. Montag got up quickly, his heart pumping, and ran down the hall and stopped at the kitchen door. Toast popped out of the silver toaster, was seized by a spidery metal hand that drenched it with melted butter. Mildred watched the toast delivered to her plate. She had both ears plugged with electronic beads that were humming the hour away. She looked up suddenly, saw him, and nodded. You all right? He asked. She was an expert at lip reading from 10 years of apprenticeship at the seashell ear thimbles. She nodded again. She set the toaster clicking away at another piece of bread. Montag sat down. His wife said, I don't know why I should be so hungry. I'm hungry. Last night, he began. Didn't sleep well. Felt terrible. God, I'm hungry. I can't figure it out. Last night, he said again. She watched his lips carefully. What about last night? Don't you remember? What? Did we have a wild party or something? Feel like I have a hangover. God, I'm hungry. Who was here? A few people, he said. That's what I thought. She chewed her toast. Sore stomach, but I'm hungry as all get out. Hope I didn't do anything too foolish at the party. No, he said quietly. The toaster spidered out a piece of buttered bread for him. He held it in his hands, feeling obligated. You don't look so hot yourself, said his wife. In the late afternoon, it rained, and the entire world was dark gray. He stood in the hall of his house, putting on his badge with the orange salamander burning across it. He looked up at the air conditioning vent in the hall for a long time. His wife in the TV parlor paused long enough from reading her script to glance up. Hey, she said, the man's thinking. Yeah, he said. I wanted to talk to you. He paused. You took all the pills in your bottle last night. Oh, I wouldn't do that, she said, surprised. The bottle was empty. I wouldn't do a thing like that. Why would I do a thing like that, she said. Maybe you took 2 pills and forgot, and took 2 more and forgot, and took 2 more, and were so dopey you kept right on until you had 30 or 40 of them in you. Heck, she said. What would I want to go and do a silly thing like that for? I don't know, he said. She was quite obviously waiting for him to go. I didn't do that, she said. Never in a billion years. All right, if you say so, he said. That's what the lady said, she turned back to her script. What's on this afternoon, he asked, tiredly. She didn't look up from the script again. Well, this play comes on a wall-to-wall circuit in 10 minutes. They mailed me my part this morning. I sent in some box tops. They write the script with 1 part missing. It's a new idea. The homemaker, that's me, is the missing part. When it comes time for the missing lines, they all look to me out of 3 walls and I say the lines. Here, for instance, the man says, what did you think of this whole idea, Helen? And he looks to see me sitting here, center stage, see? And I say, She paused and ran her finger under a line on the script. I think that's fine. And then they go right on with the play until he says, do you agree to that, Helen? And I say, I sure do. Isn't that fun, guy? He stood in the hallway looking at her. It's sure fun, she said. What's the play about? I just told you. There are these people named Bob and Ruth and Helen. Oh. It's really fun. It'll be even more fun when we can afford to have the fourth wall installed. How long do you figure before we save up and get the fourth wall torn out and put a fourth wall TV put in? It's only $2,000. That's 1/3 of my yearly salary. It's only $2,000, she replied. And I think you'd consider me sometimes. If we had a fourth wall, why, it'd be just like this room wasn't ours at all, but all kinds of exotic people's rooms. We could do without a few things. We're already doing without a few things to pay for the third wall. It was put in only 2 months ago, remember? Is that all it was? She sat looking at him for a long moment. Well, goodbye, dear. Goodbye, he said. He stopped and turned around. Does it have a happy ending? I haven't read that far. He walked over, read the last page, nodded, folded the script, and handed it back to her. He walked out of the house into the rain. The rain was thinning away, and the girl was walking in the center of the sidewalk with her head held up and a few drops falling on her face. She smiled when she saw Montag. Hello. He said hello and then said, What are you up to now? I'm still crazy. The rain feels good. I love to walk in it. I don't think I'd like that, he said. You might if you tried. I never have. She licked her lips. Rain even tastes good. What do you do? Go around trying everything all at once? He asked. Sometimes twice. She looked at something in her hand. What have you got there? I guess it's the last dandelions of the year. I didn't think I'd find one on the lawn this late. Have you ever heard of rubbing it under your chin? Look. She touched her chin with the flower, laughing. Why? If it rubs off, it means I'm in love. Has it? He could hardly do anything else but look. Well, she said, you're yellow under there. Fine. Now, let's try you now. It won't work for me. Here. Before he could move, she had put the dandelion under his chin. He drew back and she laughed. Hold still. She peered under his chin and frowned. Well, he said. What a shame, she said. You're not in love with anyone. Yes, I am. It doesn't show. I am very much in love. He tried to conjure up a face to fit the words, but there was no face. I am. Oh, please don't look that way. It's that dandelion, he said. You used it all up on yourself. That's why it won't work for me. Of course. That must be it. Oh, now I've upset you. I can see I have. I'm sorry. I really am. She touched his elbow. No, he said quickly. I'm all right. I've got to be going, so say you forgive me. I don't want you angry with me. I'm not angry. Upset, yes. I've got to go see my psychiatrist now. They make me go. I make up things to say. I don't know what he thinks of me. He says I'm a regular onion. I keep him busy peeling away at the layers. I'm inclined to believe you need a psychiatrist, said Montag. You don't mean that. He took a breath and let it out, and at last said, No, I don't mean that. The psychiatrist wants to know why I go out and hike around in the forests and watch the birds and collect butterflies. I'll show you my collection someday. Good. They want to know what I do with all my time. I tell them that sometimes I just sit and think, but I don't tell them what. I've got them running, and sometimes I tell them I like to put my head back like this and let the rain fall in my mouth. It tastes just like wine. Have you ever tried it? No, You have forgiven me, haven't you? Yes, I thought about it. Yes, I have. God knows why. You're peculiar, you're aggravating, and yet you're easy to forgive. You say you're 17? Well, next month. How odd. How strange. My wife 30, and yet you seem so much older at times. I can't get over it. You're peculiar yourself, Mr. Montag. Sometimes I even forget you're a fireman. Now, may I make you angry again? Go ahead. How did it start? How did you get into it? How did you pick your work, and how do you happen to think? How did you happen to think to take the job you have? You're not like the others. I've seen a few. I know. When I talk, you look at me. When I said something about the moon, you looked at the moon last night. The others would never do that. The others would walk off and leave me talking or threaten me. No one has time anymore for anyone else. You're one of the few who put up with me. That's why I think it's so strange you're a fireman. It just doesn't seem the right fit for you somehow. He felt his body divide itself into a hotness and a coldness, a softness and a hardness, a trembling and a not trembling, the two halves grinding together upon one another. You'd better run on to your appointment, he said. And she ran off and left him standing there in the rain. Only after a long time did he move. And then, very slowly, as he walked, he tilted his head back in the rain for just a few moments and opened his mouth. The mechanical hound slept, but did not sleep, lived, but did not live in its gently humming, gently vibrating, softly illuminated kennel in the back of the dark corner of the firehouse. The dim light of one in the morning, the moonlight from the open sky framed through the great window, touched here and there on the brass and copper and the steel of the faintly trembling beast. Light flickered on in bits of ruby glass and on the sensitive capillary hairs and the nylon-brushed nostrils of the creature that quivered gently, its 8 legs spidered under on its rubber-padded paws. Montag slid down the brass pole. He went out to look at the city and the clouds had cleared away completely, and he lit a cigarette and came back to bend down and look at the hound. It was like a giant bee had come from some field somewhere. The honey, sorry guys. It was like a great bee come home from some field where its honey is full of poison wildness, of insanity and nightmare, its body crammed with that over-rich nectar, and now it was sleeping the evil out of itself. Hello, whispered Montag, fascinated as always with the dead beast, the living beast. Nights when things got dull, which was every night, the men slid down the brass poles and set the ticking combinations of the olfactory system of the hound and let loose rats in the firehouse areaway, and sometimes chickens, and sometimes cats that would have to be drowned anyways, and there would be a betting to see which of the cats or chickens or rats the hound would seize first. The animals were turned loose. 3 seconds later, the game was done. The rat, cat, or chicken caught halfway across the areaway, gripped in the gentle paws while a 4-inch hollow steel needle plunged down from the proboscis of the hound to inject massive jolts of morphine or procaine. The pawn was then tossed in the incinerator. A new game began. Montag stayed upstairs most nights when this went on. There had been a time 2 years ago when he had bet with the best of them and lost a week's salary and faced Mildred's insane anger, which showed itself in veins and blotches. But now, nights, he lay in his bunk, face turned to the wall, listening to the whoops of laughter and the piano string scurry of rat feet, the violin squeaking of mice, and the great shadowing, motioned silence of the hound, leaping out like a moth in the raw light, finding, holding its victim, inserting the needle and going back to its kennel to die as if a switch had been turned. Montag touched the muzzle. The hound growled. Montag jumped back. The hound half rose in its kennel and looked at him with green-blue neon lights flickering in its suddenly active eyebulbs. It growled again, a strange, rasping combination of electrical sizzle, a frying sound, a scraping of metal, a turning of cogs that seemed rusty and ancient with suspicion. No, boy, said Montag, his heart pounding. He saw the silver needle extend upon the air, an inch, pull back, extend, pull back. The growl simmered in the beast, and it looked at him. Montag backed up. The hound took a step from its kennel. Montag grabbed the brass pole with one hand. The pole, reacting, slid upward and took him through the ceiling quietly. He stepped off in the half-lit deck of the upper level. He was trembling and his face was green-white. Below, the hound had sunk back down upon its 8 incredible insect legs and was humming to itself again, its multifaceted eyes at peace. Montag stood, letting the fears pass, by the drop hole. Behind him, 4 men at a card table under a green-lidded light in the corner glanced briefly but said nothing. Only the man with the captain's hat and the sign of the phoenix on his hat, at last, curious, his playing cards in his thin hand, talked across the long room. "Montag?" "It doesn't like me," said Montag. "What? The hound?" The captain studied his cards. "Come off it. It doesn't like or dislike. It just functions. It's like a lesson in ballistics. It has a trajectory we decide on for it. It follows through. It targets itself, homes itself, and cuts off. It's only copper wire, storage batteries, and electricity." Montag swallowed. Its calculators can be set to any combination. So many amino acids, so much sulfur, so much butterfat and alkaline, right? We all know that. All of those chemical balances and percentages on all of us here in the house are recorded in the master file downstairs. It'd be easy for someone to set up a partial combination on the hound's memory. A touch of amino acids, perhaps. That would account for what the animal did just now. Reacted towards me. "Hell," said the captain. Irritated, but not completely angry. Just enough memory to set it up. Just enough memory set in it by someone, so it growled when I touched it. "Now, who would do a thing like that?" asked the captain. "You haven't got any enemies here, guy." "None that I know of." "We'll have the hound checked by our technicians tomorrow." "This isn't the first time it's threatened me," said Montag. "Last month it happened twice." "We'll fix it up. Don't worry." But Montag did not move, and only stood thinking of the ventilator grill in the hall at home and what lay hidden behind the grill. If someone here in the firehouse knew about the ventilator, then mightn't they tell the hound? The captain came over to the drop hole and gave Montag a questioning glance. "I was just figuring," said Montag. "What does the hound think about down there at nights? Is it coming alive on us, really? It makes me cold." "It doesn't think about anything we don't want it to think." "That's sad," said Montag quietly, "because all we put into it is hunting and finding and killing. What a shame if that's all it can ever know." Captain Beatty snorted gently. "Hell, it's a fine bit of craftsmanship. A good rifle that can fetch its own target and guarantees the bullseye every time." "That's why," said Montag, "I wouldn't want to be its next victim." "Why? You got a guilty conscience about something?" Montag glanced up swiftly. Beatty stood there looking at him steadily with his eyes, while his mouth opened and began to laugh very softly. All right, I think we're going to stop there for today. It's been almost an hour, and I don't want to bore you guys too much. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or want to get in touch with me, you know how to reach me on Remind and on Teams. I hope you guys have a great afternoon. Stay safe, make good choices, don't get serial killed, and wash your hands.